Hello, one Equipment War here, and welcome to my build guide for my Facebreaker Cyclone build. I'm gonna start by talking about my skill tree, then I'm gonna talk about my items, and last I'm gonna talk about my skill games. You can see on the screen when I'm starting to talk about them. So, if you have any questions about what things I'm gonna talk about here, feel free to ask me in the comments. So let's get started. I'm starting as a duelist. I went for the attack speed in the beginning, and then the physical damage and life. Then I went for armor evasion life here. Then I went for master arena, bravery, and artifact gladiator. After that I went for defiance. Then I went down here, I took golem's blood, and also have warlord's reach. Warlord's reach you can get by just doing quests. So if you're doing all of the quests, you will get this one as a choice for a quest reward. So it's very easy to get. Then I went down to the shield wheel and I took both the studio and retaliation. Because of this build's main defense are from its very high block chance, so that's why I went for so much block chance this build. And also using a shield, like retaliation, will actually give you damage to your unarmed attack. So that's very nice. I then went for cloak and chain because I really need some resistance, and also that armor and evasion, increased armor evasion is quite nice. Here we have my only source of mana that I need, is life and the mana leech node here. And but when you're leveling up this build, it can be a good idea to take both this mana leech node here and this spirit void here. And when you have enough damage to sustain your mana, you can just take away both spirit void and this mana leech node here, and just have this one. And here's my main source of life life back, which is vitality void. And I also have iron reflexes, so I convert all of my evasion into armor instead. This is quite nice. Moving on. I went for command of steel again. I really want that block chance, but also give me a decent chunk of damage actually as well. I have a Yule socket here, which is an abyssal Yule, and what you want for your abyssal Yule, you want flat physical damage to your attack. All sorts of flat physical damage are incredibly viable for you, and will give you a lot of damage. And also try to get life on them as well. I also have fitness for the attack speed. And then I went for Heart of the Oak. This one here I can't pronounce, but again, the block chance is quite nice. I went for both Weapon Arrow Sorcery and Aspect of the Lynx. I think I pronounced this wrong. But again, block chance. And Aspect of the Lynx, quite nice. And I also went for Herbalism. Quite a pretty nice life note. Moving from the range area into the marauder side of the tree, I have another Yule socket here, and again you can see physical damage to attacks and some life. This one happened to have one damage, which doesn't help me at all, but I mainly went in for this one for the flat physical damage and life. I have the whole big life wheel here, and I have Path to Warrior. I had before I took Sentinel, because as I'm going to see on my gear later on, getting max resistance in this build is a little bit tricky, but I'm going to talk more about that later. And into the Marauder area, I went for Golem's Blood, and I have Diamond Skid. Again, I'm going to talk more about this when it comes to gear, because getting max resistance is a little bit tricky. I have Heart of the Warrior and Born to Fight. And then I have Solidarity, again, even more block chance, and also some small amount of damage. I have Juggernaut for some nice armor and life. And I have another socket here. This one have physical damage to claws, and I'm gonna talk more about that later, why you can have both flat physical damage to attacks and flat physical damage to claws. And that have to do with some of the items later. I have Barbarism, and I have Dismembering, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this as well when it comes to crit chance, but normally you can't crit unarmed. But again, I have a special item. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. Last thing, my Ascendancy tree. I ascend as a gladiator, mainly for the block chance. Again, I really much want my block chance to be very high to have really good protection. So I first went for Painforged. After that, Versatile Combatant. And then I went for Violent Retaliation, and then Blood in the Eye. If you really want even higher damage, you can go for gorgeous violence and just drop violent retaliation, but I think it's maybe not the best idea, because violent retaliation is just an amazing note and also give you a ton of damage when you block, which you're doing all the time. But you can drop it for gorgeous violence, but I don't really recommend it. And when it comes to the bandit, I helped Oak in Act 2 to get physical damage, life generation, and physical damage protection. So let's go to my items. I can start by talking about my most important item, which is of course the Facebreaker or the Facebreaker gloves. This is basically my weapon. And that is because they give a huge amount of damage to unarmed attacks. You can see it gave me 786 more physical damage when with unarmed attacks. Which means that every little bit of flat physical damage I get to this build will give me a huge amount of damage. But they're also very inexpensive. I think I got this pair of gloves here for, I think it was like 1 or 2 chaos. So they are basically dirt cheap. And you want as high number as possible on the more physical damage with unarmed. And the highest number you can get there in the league are 800. On standard you can actually get these gloves with 1000 more physical damage with unarmed. But then they are quite pricey. So let's move on. For my rings, I want flat physical damage. You always want flat physical damage on your rings in a Facebreaker build. And good resistance and good life. And even some stats if you need some intelligence or need some dexterity. Same thing with other ring. This ring is not as good. And by the way, I know steel rings would be absolutely better, but they are quite expensive, but I might get them in the future if I really want to improve my damage even more. For my amulet, which is a little bit more special, this is Rigwald's Curse, and it actually gives you crit chance when unarmed. Normally you can't crit without a weapon if you're using melee attacks unarmed, but this amulet allows you to do that. It also allows modifiers to claw, like damage to claws, or attack speed to claws, or critical strike chance to claw, to apply to unarmed as well. So you can take claw notes in the skill tree or on the items, and they will apply to your unarmed attacks. This amulet was relatively expensive when I first got it in the league. I think I paid like 30 chaos for it, but it should not be as expensive right now. Moving on to my shield. This is my favorite shield in the entire game. And that is because it has the hits can't be evaded. You also have quite good block chance, actually one of the best in the game. It has some relatively armor and a huge amount of damage to counterattacks. So my counterattacks like Reckoning will do a good amount of damage to my enemies. But this shield is also relatively expensive, and I think I paid like 30 chaos for this one as well. But again, it was more in the early league, so it might have got down a little bit now. For my helmet, I'm using Abyssus, which makes me a little bit as a glass cannon to physical damage attacks. And that's why I want as high block chance as you can get to protect me against hard physical damage attacks. And when it comes to Abyssus, it gives me a huge amount of damage because it adds a lot of physical damage, 30 to 60 to physical damage. It also gives me some attributes, which is always nice. A good chunk of melee critical strike multiplier, because I can crit. It also ironically gave me a huge amount of armor, but the negative thing with this helmet, it is the increased physical damage taken. It also have no life. So what you want for when you're gonna go for your Abyssus, first wait till you have higher level, like level 70, to when you are more comfortable with your defense. And whatever you do, be very careful if you're using this helmet in the labyrinth with physical damage over time, traps and all of that, because you take a lot of extra damage. But you want as low as possible value of the increased physical damage taken. You can have 30. And if you can get an Abyssus with 30 increased physical damage taken, that's the best helmet you can go for. Moving on, using Meglador's Girdle. I am mainly using this belt for the flat physical damage, but also has some quite nice stats, give me a good amount of strength, which is always nice, increases my damage, giving me some cold resistance, increases my flask recovery rate, and also a good chunk of life. So they are a quite good belt in any case, and it's actually quite affordable. It cost me like 1 alchemy or something like that. It is dirt cheap, so it's overall a really good belt. But I'm mainly using it for the flat physical damage. Moving to my armor. What you want for your armor, you want life, resistance, and as high armor value as possible. And it's easier to roll this color combination if you have an armor and evasion armor. And finally my boots. I'm using this pair of boots here mainly for the resistance, because I really need some resistance, because if you have seen one thing with my gear, my shield have no resistance, my helmet have no resistance, my amulet have no resistance, my gloves have no resistance, and pretty much no resistance on my belt as well. I have some cold resist there. So I really wanted some resistance on this one. And you also want some movement speed. It's not that very important to have high movement speed on it, but a little bit movement speed is always nice. And of course as good life as you can, and armor value. Or evasion value, it doesn't really matter because I'm using iron reflexes. So I really like these boots here. There are a pair of boots that actually give flat physical damage, but I choose to sacrifice some damage for some protection. Moving to my flask, always when you have Abyssus, or actually pretty much in every build, always carry an anti-bleeding flask like this one, removes bleeding on use. Because when you have Abyssus on you, you take a huge amount of damage from the physical damage over time. So always carry an anti-bleed flask. Then I have just a flask with a quick recovery rate, which is quite nice. Also removes shock, which is not that important. I have a Lion's Roar, and let's see if we can use one. You can see my damage right now, without any of my other buffers, are 132,000 tooltip DPS if I'm using the flask. You can see my damage go up with about 30,000. That give me a huge amount of damage. And they're also quite cheap. I think I get this flask for about, what can it be now, 5k or something like that. It might differ. Then I'm using one of my favorite flasks in the game, which is our Quicksilver flask. Good to move around fast between packs and maps. And actually a little bit defensive, because you can move out of the way of dangerous things. And I'm using a diamond flask, which actually have removed burning on use, which is not that important, but it's quite nice. I'm using a diamond flask to increase the chance of me getting a crit, which is really nice. And that's pretty much all of my gear. If you have any questions about my gear, feel free to ask me in the comments. And before you ask anything, you can see I have some Screaming Eagles here. There are just some other items on my other setup, but just using them to level up some gems. And I should really put some gems here. But just me leveling up stuff. So let's talk about my skill gems. I can start with my main damage skill, which is Cyclone. And I'm using a Val Cyclone. And just to avoid any confusion, they have changed so you now can use a Val skill. This applies to all Val skills. That you will get both the normal version and the Val version. So when you're using a Val skill, you will get both the normal version and the Val version, just to avoid any confusion. And my Cyclone are supported by faster attacks, melee physical damage, maim, brutality, and critical strikes. And because I'm using brutality, that means I'm doing pure physical damage. So I'm doing my Cyclone doing no elemental damage and no chaos damage, but that's only applying to my Cyclone. I'm using Herald of Purity, pretty much a must-have for this build, because it gives me flat physical damage, which is a good damage boost. I'm also using a Curse Aura, which is vulnerability, together with Blasphemy. So when you're linking a curse to Blasphemy, it becomes an aura around you, and you will automatically curse nearby enemies. And vulnerability increases the damage the enemy takes from your physical attacks, also giving them a chance to start bleeding. And they also take extra physical damage from damage over time, which is really nice. So overall, a really good curse for this build. I'm using Blood Rage to get good attack speed, melee, physical damage leeches as life, and also give me a good chance to get a frenzy shot, which is a good damage boost for this build. I'm using one level 1 cost on damage taken, linked to Tempest Shield, which gives me extra block chance if I take some damage. I'm using one movement skill setup, which is Shield Charge, linked to Fortify, so it gets more protection when I'm hurting enemies with my Shield Charge. I have a Power Shot and Crit, so if I crit with my Shield Charge, I get a Power Shot, which is also a really good damage boost to my build. And I have a faster attack support game, so I can use my Shield Charge even faster. It's actually doing quite good damage in itself. I'm using one counter-attack skill, which is Reckoning, together with melee physical damage, increased critical strike chance, and again power shots on crits. So I have two ways to getting some power shots here and there, which are a really good damage boost. And because they're using Reckoning together with let's take a fast look here in the skill tree. Reckoning are giving a good boost from Pain Fort because it doubles the damage of counter attacks, which is really nice. So my Reckoning actually doing really good damage to enemies, and also doing cold damage and getting some good boost to cold damage from my shield here, because it adds a lot of cold damage to my counter attacks. So that's pretty much my skill game. If you have any questions about my skill game, please let me know. So I'm now going to show this character in action, and I thank you all for watching. And if you have any questions about the build, feel free to ask me in the comments.